behind the bulletproof glass of the royal vehicle, a 7-year-old princess sat with tears streaming down her cheeks, unaware that her moment of vulnerability would spark a chain of events that would forever alter the protocols of royal protection. What began as a simple journey through London's bustling streets would become a testament to the unbreakable bond between duty and compassion, proving that even the most disciplined guardians have hearts that can be moved by a child's tears. This is the true story of how one royal guard's split-second decision to comfort a crying princess would challenge centuries of tradition, ignite a media storm, and ultimately redefine what it means to serve and protect the future of the British monarchy. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Kensington Palace as Princess Charlotte adjusted her small navy coat for the third time in 5 minutes. At 7 years old, she had already learned that royal appearances required patience, proper posture, and a smile that never wavered, even when her stomach felt like it was full of butterflies. Today's engagement was particularly important, a visit to the Children's Hospital where she would meet young patients and their families, bringing a moment of joy to those facing difficult times. Royal Protection Officer James Whitfield stood at attention near the palace entrance, his trained eyes scanning the perimeter while his mind ran through the security protocols for the day's schedule. At 34, James had spent the last 8 years protecting members of the royal family, and he understood that his role extended far beyond physical security. He was a silent guardian, a watchful presence who ensured that the delicate balance between royal duty and personal safety was maintained at all times. The black Range Rover gleamed in the morning light as the royal convoy prepared for departure. James took his position in the passenger seat, while his colleague, Officer Sarah Mitchell, would follow in the second vehicle. Princess Charlotte climbed into the back seat with her usual grace, though James noticed through the rearview mirror that she seemed quieter than usual. Her nanny, Mrs. Elizabeth Hartwell, settled beside her, carrying a small bag containing emergency supplies and comfort items that might be needed during the visit. As the convoy pulled away from Kensington Palace, James couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about today. Perhaps it was the way Princess Charlotte kept looking out the window with an expression that seemed far too serious for a child her age, or maybe it was the unusually heavy traffic that was making their journey longer than anticipated. Whatever it was, his protective instincts were more heightened than usual. The streets of London buzzed with their typical morning energy as commuters hurried to work, tourists snapped photos of iconic landmarks, and street vendors set up their stalls for another day of business. None of them were aware that just meters away, behind tinted windows, a young princess was struggling with emotions that she didn't quite understand. The weight of her royal responsibilities, combined with the natural anxieties of childhood, created a perfect storm of feelings that she had been trained to suppress but was finding increasingly difficult to manage. Mrs. Hartwell noticed Charlotte's fidgeting and gently placed a reassuring hand on the child's arm. "Remember what we practiced, Your Royal Highness," she whispered softly. "Deep breaths, shoulders back, and think of all the children you'll be helping today by bringing them happiness." Charlotte nodded obediently, but her small hands continued to twist nervously in her lap, and James observed through the mirror how she kept biting her lower lip, a habit she'd developed when feeling overwhelmed. The hospital visit had been planned for months, with every detail carefully coordinated between the palace staff, hospital administration, and security teams. Princess Charlotte would tour the pediatric ward, meet with several young patients, participate in a brief art therapy session, and conclude with a small ceremony where she would officially open the hospital's new children's garden. It was the kind of engagement that the royal family excelled at, bringing hope and joy to those who needed it most while fulfilling their duty to serve the public. As they navigated through London's increasingly congested streets, James received updates through his earpiece about potential delays due to an unexpected protest that had formed near their planned route. The decision was made to take an alternate path that would add approximately 15 minutes to their journey. James glanced back at Princess Charlotte and noticed that she had grown even quieter, her small face pressed against the window as she watched the world pass by. The extended journey gave Charlotte more time to think about what lay ahead, and, unfortunately, more time for her anxieties to build. She had been looking forward to meeting the children at the hospital, but she was also worried about saying the wrong thing or not being helpful enough. Her recent lessons on royal protocol had emphasized the importance of being a source of comfort and inspiration, and the weight of that responsibility felt enormous for someone who still occasionally needed comfort herself. Mrs. Hartwell tried to engage Charlotte in conversation about her favorite books and upcoming birthday plans, but the princess's responses were brief and distracted. James could see that the child was becoming increasingly agitated, and he wondered if there was anything he could do within the bounds of his professional role to help ease her obvious distress. His training had taught him to maintain appropriate distance while remaining vigilant, but every instinct he possessed as both a protector and a human being told him that this little girl needed support. The traffic came to a complete standstill as they approached a busy intersection, and the delay stretched from minutes into what felt like an eternity. Charlotte's breathing became more rapid, and James watched with growing concern as she pressed her hands against her chest in what appeared to be the beginning of a panic attack. Mrs. Hartwell immediately recognized the signs and began speaking in soothing tones, but Charlotte's distress was escalating despite her nanny's best efforts. The confined space of the vehicle, combined with the mounting pressure of the upcoming public appearance, created a sense of claustrophobia that overwhelmed Charlotte's ability to cope. She had experienced similar feelings before, but never while trapped in traffic with no escape route and a schedule that demanded her presence at a specific time. The weight of expectation, the fear of disappointing people, and the simple anxiety of being a child in an adult world all converged into a moment of crisis that she could no longer contain. James found himself in an impossible situation. His duty was clear: maintain security protocols and ensure the princess's safety until they reached their destination. But his human instincts told him that the greatest threat to Princess Charlotte at that moment wasn't an external danger but rather the internal struggle that was causing her obvious distress. He had spent years training to protect the royal family from physical harm, but no manual had prepared him for how to handle a child's emotional crisis while maintaining professional boundaries. The convoy remained stationary in traffic as Charlotte's breathing became even more labored. Mrs. Hartwell's gentle words of encouragement weren't having the desired effect, and it became clear that a different approach might be necessary. James made a decision that would later be scrutinized by his supervisors, analyzed by the media, and ultimately celebrated by parents around the world who understood the universal challenge of comforting a distressed child. Without breaking protocol entirely, James activated the vehicle's privacy partition to create a more intimate space, then turned in his seat to face Princess Charlotte directly. His voice was calm and steady as he spoke to her, not as a royal protection officer addressing a member of the royal family, but as one human being offering comfort to another who needed it. The moment he made eye contact with Charlotte, something shifted in the atmosphere of the vehicle, setting the stage for what would become an extraordinary display of compassion that transcended the usual boundaries of duty and protocol. James Whitfield had faced armed intruders, navigated hostile crowds, and managed security crises that would have challenged even the most experienced professionals, but nothing in his extensive training had prepared him for the sight of 7-year-old Princess Charlotte with tears streaming down her cheeks, her small body shaking with barely contained sobs. The royal protocols that governed every aspect of his interaction with the family seemed suddenly irrelevant in the face of a child's genuine distress. "Your Royal Highness," James said softly, his voice carrying none of the formal distance that usually characterized his professional communications. "I can see that you're feeling worried about something. Would it help to talk about what's making you feel this way?" His question broke several unwritten rules about the appropriate relationship between security personnel and royal family members, but James knew instinctively that this moment called for humanity over hierarchy. Charlotte looked up at him through her tears, surprised by the kindness in his voice and the genuine concern in his eyes. She had become accustomed to adults speaking to her with careful formality, measuring their words and maintaining respectful distance even when offering comfort. James's direct, warm approach caught her off guard in the best possible way, creating a safe space where she felt permission to be vulnerable rather than perfectly composed. "I'm scared," Charlotte whispered, her voice so quiet that James had to lean closer to hear her properly. "What if I say the wrong thing to the children at the hospital? What if I can't make them feel better? What if they're disappointed when they meet me?" The questions tumbled out in a rush, revealing the enormous pressure that this young child had placed on herself to be perfect in every situation. Mrs. Hartwell watched this exchange with a mixture of surprise and relief. She had been trying for weeks to help Charlotte process these anxieties, but the princess had remained stubbornly reserved about her fears, maintaining the stoic demeanor that had been ingrained in her from birth. Something about James's approach had unlocked Charlotte's willingness to be honest about her struggles, and Mrs. Hartwell recognized the value of allowing this conversation to continue. "You know what I think?" James said, reaching slowly toward the small tissue box that Mrs. Hartwell offered. I think those children are going to be so excited to meet you that they won't care if you stumble over a word or two. They're not expecting you to be a perfect grown-up. They just want to meet a real princess who cares enough to visit them. He handed Charlotte a tissue and waited patiently while she dried her tears. The traffic around them continued to crawl forward at a snail's pace, but the atmosphere inside the vehicle had completely transformed. James found himself sharing stories from his own childhood, talking about times when he had felt nervous about important events and how he had learned to manage those feelings. He told Charlotte about his niece, who was close to her age, and how she sometimes worried about similar things when she had to perform in school plays or give presentations. The secret, James continued, his voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had learned to face his fears through years of high-stakes professional challenges, is remembering that being nervous means you care about doing well. It means you have a good heart and you want to help people. That's exactly the kind of person those children need to meet today. His words carried a sincerity that resonated with Charlotte in a way that formal reassurances never had. Charlotte's breathing gradually began to slow as James continued talking, his calm presence providing an anchor in the storm of her emotions. She found herself laughing at his gentle jokes and feeling genuinely curious about the stories he shared. For the first time in weeks, she felt like a normal child having a conversation with a trusted adult rather than a royal figure being managed by her handlers. Tell me about the children we're going to meet today, Charlotte said, her curiosity overriding her anxiety. James smiled, recognizing that her interest in others was beginning to overshadow her self-consciousness. He pulled out his briefing notes and began sharing age-appropriate details about some of the young patients they would encounter, focusing on their interests and personalities rather than their medical conditions. There was Emma, age 6, who loved to paint and had been working on a special picture to show Princess Charlotte. There was Michael, age 9, who was fascinated by space exploration and dreamed of becoming an astronaut. There was little Sophia, age 4, who had been practicing a song she wanted to sing for the princess. As James described each child, Charlotte's expression brightened with genuine excitement about meeting them. They sound wonderful, Charlotte said, her voice stronger and more confident than it had been all morning. I can't wait to see Emma's painting and hear Sophia's song. Do you think Michael knows about the new space station they're building? Her transformation from anxious child to eager visitor was remarkable, and James felt a deep satisfaction knowing that his willingness to break protocol had helped facilitate this positive change. Mrs. Hartwell observed this interaction with professional interest and personal warmth. She had spent months trying to help Charlotte overcome her performance anxiety using traditional approaches, but James had achieved in 15 minutes what she had been unable to accomplish in weeks. His natural ability to connect with children, combined with his genuine respect for Charlotte as a person rather than just a royal figure, had created exactly the right conditions for healing. The traffic finally began to move more freely, and James could see the hospital building coming into view in the distance. He knew that their arrival would signal a return to formal protocols and the careful choreography that governed royal visits, but he also sensed that something fundamental had shifted during their conversation. Charlotte had discovered that she could share her fears without losing respect, and James had learned that sometimes the most important protection he could offer was emotional rather than physical. Officer Whitfield, Charlotte said as they approached the hospital entrance, using his formal title for the first time during their conversation. Thank you for helping me feel better. I promise I'll remember what you said about caring being more important than being perfect. Her words carried the mature gratitude of someone who understood that she had received a genuine gift. James felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with professional accomplishment and everything to do with the simple human satisfaction of helping a child in distress. Your Royal Highness, it has been my absolute honor. I know you're going to bring so much joy to those children today, and they're going to see exactly what I see: a kind, thoughtful person who genuinely cares about others. As the convoy pulled into the hospital's secure entrance, James could see the crowd of staff members, patients' families, and media representatives who had gathered to welcome Princess Charlotte. The sight that would have triggered intense anxiety just 30 minutes earlier now seemed manageable to Charlotte, who was armed with new confidence and a fresh perspective on her role. The transformation was so complete that even the hospital's child psychologist, who had been briefed about Charlotte's recent struggles with public appearances, was amazed by the princess's composed and genuinely enthusiastic demeanor as she stepped out of the vehicle. What no one except Mrs. Hartwell and the convoy drivers knew was that this remarkable change had been facilitated by a royal protection officer who had chosen compassion over protocol when a child needed comfort more than security. The moment Princess Charlotte stepped through the hospital's main entrance, James witnessed something extraordinary. The child who had been overwhelmed with anxiety just minutes earlier now moved with genuine confidence and warmth, her earlier conversation having fundamentally changed her approach to the day ahead. She greeted the hospital director with a bright smile and immediately asked thoughtful questions about the children she would be meeting, demonstrating the kind of natural curiosity and compassion that no amount of royal training could manufacture. James maintained his professional position at a respectful distance, but he found himself watching Charlotte's interactions with a deeper appreciation for her character. When she met 6-year-old Emma, the young patient who had been eagerly waiting to show her painting, Charlotte didn't just offer polite praise. Instead, she knelt down to Emma's eye level and asked detailed questions about the colors she had chosen and the story behind the picture. The genuine interest in her voice was unmistakable, and Emma's face lit up with joy at having her artistic choices taken so seriously. The pediatric ward had been decorated with balloons and banners for the royal visit, but the real magic happened in the quiet moments between Charlotte and the young patients. James observed how she seemed to have absorbed his earlier advice about caring being more important than perfection. When she struggled to pronounce the name of 9-year-old Michael's favorite constellation, instead of becoming flustered, she laughed and asked him to teach her the correct pronunciation. Michael was delighted to become the teacher, and their conversation about space exploration lasted much longer than the schedule allowed. Mrs. Hartwell watched these interactions with amazement, recognizing that Charlotte's transformation went far beyond simply overcoming pre-visit nerves. The princess had discovered something fundamental about herself during that conversation with James, that her authentic personality was far more powerful than any carefully rehearsed royal demeanor. She was connecting with these children as a peer, sharing their excitement about books and games and dreams, rather than maintaining the distant kindness that had characterized her previous public appearances. The art therapy session had been planned as a brief photo opportunity, but it evolved into something much more meaningful. Charlotte sat cross-legged on the floor with a group of young patients, painting alongside them rather than simply observing their work. When 4-year-old Sophia became frustrated because her paintbrush wasn't creating the effect she wanted, Charlotte gently showed her a technique she had learned in her own art lessons, speaking to her with the patient kindness of an older sister rather than the formal politeness of a royal visitor. James found himself moved by the scene, understanding that he had played a role in enabling this remarkable transformation. His decision to break protocol and offer genuine comfort during Charlotte's moment of crisis had rippled outward, creating conditions for authentic connections that would have been impossible if she had arrived still trapped in her anxiety. The children responded to Charlotte's newfound confidence with openness and joy, creating exactly the kind of meaningful interaction that royal visits were meant to achieve but rarely accomplished so successfully. The hospital staff members who had organized the visit were equally impressed by the change in atmosphere. Dr. Sarah Chen, the head of pediatrics, had participated in several royal visits over the years and had grown accustomed to carefully managed interactions that felt more like performances than genuine meetings. Charlotte's natural engagement with the children was creating moments of real connection that would be remembered long after the cameras stopped rolling and the official protocols were forgotten. When it came time for Sophia to sing the song she had been practicing, Charlotte didn't just listen politely from her designated position. Instead, she sat beside Sophia's hospital bed, holding the little girl's hand and encouraging her with gentle nods and smiles. Sophia's rendition of "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" was imperfect, with forgotten lyrics and off-key moments, but Charlotte's genuine appreciation made it feel like a performance worthy of a royal concert hall. The tears in Sophia's mother's eyes reflected the profound impact of having her daughter's effort truly seen and valued. James continued to monitor the security situation while marveling at the organic way the visit was unfolding. The original schedule had called for precisely timed segments with carefully managed transitions, but Charlotte's authentic engagement was creating a flow that felt more natural and, ultimately, more beneficial for everyone involved. The children were responding to her presence with the kind of joy and excitement that no amount of planning could guarantee, and their enthusiasm was feeding back into Charlotte's confidence in a positive cycle. During the ceremony to open the new children's garden, Charlotte surprised everyone by asking if she could add something to her prepared remarks. Standing before the assembled crowd of hospital staff, patients' families, and media representatives, she spoke from the heart about what she had learned from the children she had met that day. She talked about Emma's creativity, Michael's curiosity, and Sophia's courage, making it clear that she considered herself fortunate to have spent time with such remarkable young people. "These children have taught me that being brave doesn't mean not feeling scared," Charlotte said, her voice clear and confident. "It means doing important things even when they feel difficult. Today, I watched children face their challenges with such courage and kindness, and I feel inspired to be braver in my own life." Her words carried a maturity and authenticity that impressed everyone present, including the media representatives who had expected the usual carefully scripted royal remarks. James felt a surge of pride as he listened to Charlotte's impromptu speech, recognizing echoes of their earlier conversation in her words but also seeing how she had made those concepts her own. She had taken his simple advice about caring being more important than perfection and transformed it into wisdom that she could share with others. The child who had been paralyzed by fear of saying the wrong thing was now speaking spontaneously about courage and compassion with remarkable eloquence. The garden ceremony concluded with Charlotte planting a small tree alongside several of the young patients, symbolizing growth and hope for the future. As she worked alongside the children, getting dirt under her fingernails and laughing at their jokes, James knew that this moment would be remembered as something special not just by those present but by everyone who would eventually see the photographs and hear the stories from this day. As the visit drew to a close, Charlotte made a point of saying individual goodbyes to each child she had met, promising to remember their conversations and asking them to keep her updated on their progress. Her genuine interest in their lives extended beyond the formal requirements of the royal visit, reflecting a level of personal investment that impressed the hospital staff and delighted the young patients. The return journey to Kensington Palace was markedly different from the morning's anxious trip. Charlotte sat in the back seat with a satisfied smile, reviewing the drawings and small gifts the children had given her and asking Mrs. Hartwell to help her remember all the details she wanted to share with her parents. Her transformation from nervous child to confident young ambassador had been so complete that it was hard to believe just a few hours had passed since her morning crisis. James couldn't help but feel that he had witnessed something extraordinary, understanding that his choice to prioritize compassion over protocol had contributed to one of the most successful royal engagements he had ever observed. But, more importantly, he had helped a child discover her own strength and capacity for meaningful connection with others, a lesson that would serve Charlotte well throughout her royal life and beyond. The photographs from the hospital visit began appearing in newspapers and social media within hours of Charlotte's departure, and the response was unlike anything the royal family's communications team had seen in years. The images captured something that professional photographers and royal watchers had been hoping to see for months: genuine moments of connection between a young princess and the people she would one day serve. Charlotte's natural interactions with the children, her authentic smiles, and her obvious comfort in their presence told a story that resonated far beyond the usual royal coverage. James Whitfield returned to his duties at Kensington Palace that evening with a sense of satisfaction tempered by professional uncertainty. He had broken protocol by engaging in personal conversation with Princess Charlotte during her moment of distress, and, while the outcome had been overwhelmingly positive, he knew that his actions would be subject to review by his supervisors. The Royal Protection Service operated under strict guidelines for good reason, and individual officers were not supposed to make independent decisions about when and how to deviate from established procedures. The first indication that his actions had been noticed came the following morning when James was called into a meeting with Commander Patricia Hayes, the head of Royal Protection Services. He expected a formal reprimand for overstepping his boundaries, but instead found himself facing a woman who seemed more curious than critical about the events of the previous day. Commander Hayes had spent the night reading reports from Mrs. Hartwell, reviewing security footage from the convoy, and analyzing media coverage of the hospital visit. "Officer Whitfield," Commander Hayes began, her tone professional but not hostile, "I've received some interesting reports about yesterday's events. Mrs. Hartwell has submitted a detailed account of Princess Charlotte's emotional crisis and your response to it. She's also requested that you be commended for your handling of a sensitive situation that could have had serious implications for the success of the hospital visit. James felt surprise wash over him, having expected criticism rather than praise for his decision to prioritize Charlotte's emotional needs over strict protocol adherence. The commander continued, "I've also had a phone call from the Princess of Wales, who wanted to express her personal gratitude for your kindness to Charlotte." Apparently, the princess came home yesterday evening more excited about a royal engagement than she had ever been before, and she specifically mentioned how much your conversation had helped her overcome her anxiety. James realized that Charlotte had shared details of their interaction with her parents, something that could have gone very differently if she had felt that his approach was inappropriate or unprofessional. Commander Hayes opened a folder containing printed screenshots of social media posts, newspaper articles, and public commentary about the hospital visit. "The public response to yesterday's engagement has been extraordinary," she said, spreading the materials across her desk. "People are responding to what they're describing as Princess Charlotte's authentic warmth and natural connection with the children. The hospital has received hundreds of messages from families expressing how moved they were by the coverage, and several major charities have reported increases in donations after seeing the princess's obvious genuine care for the young patients." James looked at the collection of positive coverage with amazement, understanding that Charlotte's transformed approach to the visit had created exactly the kind of public engagement that the royal family hoped to achieve through their charitable work. The articles didn't just praise her performance of royal duties, they celebrated her evident humanity and the real impact of her presence on the children and families she had met. The photographs captured moments of genuine joy and connection that couldn't have been staged or manufactured through careful planning. "What concerns me," Commander Hayes continued, "is that you made a unilateral decision to deviate from established protocol without consulting your supervisor or seeking authorization. While the outcome was positive, we need to discuss whether your approach represents a precedent we want to encourage or an exception that worked out well despite violating proper procedures." James nodded, understanding that his actions needed to be evaluated within the broader context of royal security protocols rather than simply judged by their immediate results. The conversation that followed was more nuanced than James had expected. Commander Hayes acknowledged that traditional security training focused primarily on physical threats and procedural compliance, but recent events had highlighted the need for protection officers to also consider the emotional and psychological well-being of the family members they served. Charlotte's anxiety attack in the vehicle had represented a genuine crisis that could have compromised her ability to fulfill her royal duties, making James's intervention a form of protection even if it didn't fit traditional definitions. The royal family exists in a unique environment where personal struggles must often be managed in public settings, Commander Hayes explained. Princess Charlotte is 7 years old, but she's expected to handle pressures that would challenge many adults. If our protection officers can't recognize and respond appropriately to emotional distress, we're failing in our fundamental duty to safeguard her well-being. James began to understand that his actions might represent an evolution in how royal protection was conceptualized rather than a violation of existing standards. The meeting concluded with Commander Hayes assigning James to work with a team of child psychologists and royal protocol experts to develop guidelines for how protection officers should respond when young members of the royal family experience emotional crises during public engagements. His natural ability to connect with children and his successful handling of Charlotte's situation made him an ideal contributor to this important policy development work. Meanwhile, Princess Charlotte was experiencing her own ripple effects from the hospital visit. Her parents had noticed a significant change in her attitude toward upcoming royal engagements, with the anxiety that had been building for months replaced by genuine excitement about meeting new people and learning about different organizations. The success of the hospital visit had given her confidence that she could handle public appearances without losing her authentic personality, a realization that would prove invaluable throughout her royal career. Mrs. Hartwell observed Charlotte's transformation with professional satisfaction and personal joy. The child's willingness to be vulnerable about her fears had opened the door to more honest conversations about the challenges and opportunities of royal life. Instead of focusing exclusively on proper behavior and protocol compliance, they could now discuss how to balance royal duties with personal authenticity, using Charlotte's natural compassion and curiosity as strengths rather than trying to suppress them in favor of formal composure. The hospital staff members who had participated in the visit continued to share stories about their interactions with Princess Charlotte, and their enthusiasm created positive publicity that extended far beyond the initial media coverage. Dr. Sarah Chen wrote a detailed letter to Kensington Palace describing the impact of Charlotte's visit on patient morale and staff motivation, noting that several young patients had shown improved cooperation with their treatment plans after being inspired by their meeting with the princess. James found himself reflecting on how a single moment of choosing compassion over protocol had created such far-reaching positive consequences. His decision to comfort a crying child had not only helped Charlotte overcome her immediate crisis but had also contributed to a successful royal engagement that generated significant public goodwill and charitable impact. The experience had taught him that effective protection sometimes required understanding and responding to threats that weren't physical or security related but were equally capable of compromising the people he was sworn to protect. As word of James's approach spread within royal protection circles, other officers began sharing similar experiences of times when they had witnessed emotional distress in family members but had felt constrained by protocol from offering assistance. The recognition that protection duties might need to include emotional support for young royals dealing with unique pressures sparked important conversations about how to balance professional boundaries with human compassion, ultimately leading to significant changes in how royal protection officers were trained and deployed. 6 months after the hospital visit that changed everything, James Whitfield found himself standing in the same conference room at Kensington Palace where he had once expected to receive a reprimand for breaking protocol. Instead, he was there to present the final version of the new Royal Protection Emotional Support Guidelines to senior palace officials, child welfare experts, and representatives from major children's charities. The document represented a revolutionary approach to royal security that prioritized the holistic well-being of young family members alongside traditional physical protection measures. Princess Charlotte, now 8 years old and visibly more confident in her public role, had become something of a sensation in royal circles for her natural ability to connect with people during official engagements. The transformation that began during her conversation with James had continued to develop over the months, with each successful public appearance building her confidence and refining her understanding of how to balance royal duty with personal authenticity. Her parents had noticed that she no longer experienced the pre-engagement anxiety that had once made family events a source of stress for everyone involved. The new guidelines that James had helped develop were already being implemented with remarkable success. Royal protection officers now received specialized training in recognizing signs of emotional distress in children and adolescents, along with age-appropriate intervention strategies that could be deployed without compromising security protocols. The training emphasized that emotional crises could be just as threatening to a royal family member's ability to fulfill their duties as any physical danger, making supportive intervention a legitimate and necessary aspect of protection work. Mrs. Elizabeth Hartwell had been promoted to senior royal nanny partly based on her thoughtful documentation of Charlotte's transformation and her advocacy for the kind of compassionate intervention that James had provided during the crucial moments in the vehicle. Her detailed reports had helped convince palace officials that emotional support needed to be integrated into royal protection rather than treated as a separate concern handled exclusively by family members or specialized staff. The hospital that Charlotte had visited continued to benefit from the ongoing positive attention generated by that remarkable day. Donations to the pediatric ward had increased by 40%, allowing for significant improvements to patient facilities and the addition of new therapeutic programs. Several of the children Charlotte had met during her visit had recovered fully and returned to normal activities, but they maintained correspondence with the princess through carefully managed letter exchanges that brought joy to all parties involved. James had been assigned as Princess Charlotte's primary protection officer for future engagements, a decision that reflected both his proven ability to work effectively with her and the palace's recognition that successful royal protection required understanding the individual needs and personalities of family members. Their working relationship had evolved into something uniquely effective, with Charlotte feeling comfortable enough to communicate honestly about her concerns while James provided both security expertise and emotional support when needed. The media coverage of Charlotte's public appearances had shifted significantly since the hospital visit, with journalists and photographers noting her increased confidence and natural charm during interactions with the public. Royal correspondents who had previously written about her obvious nervousness during formal events now described her as a natural ambassador and wise beyond her years in her approach to royal duties. The authentic connection she formed during public engagements generated the kind of positive publicity that palace communications teams could never manufacture artificially. Commander Patricia Hayes had presented the new emotional support protocols to international royal protection services, sharing the lessons learned from Charlotte's experience with security professionals from other monarchies facing similar challenges with younger family members. The British approach of integrating emotional support into traditional protection duties was being studied and adapted by royal households around the world, creating a new standard for how to safeguard the well-being of children born into positions of public responsibility. The Children's Hospital had established an annual award in Princess Charlotte's honor, recognizing young patients who demonstrated exceptional courage and kindness during their treatment. Charlotte herself participated in the selection process, reading nomination letters and helping choose recipients who embodied the same spirit of resilience and compassion she had learned to embrace during her own challenging moments. The award ceremony had become one of her favorite annual engagements, representing the kind of meaningful work that made royal duties feel purposeful rather than burdensome. James often reflected on how his split-second decision to prioritize compassion over strict protocol had created ripple effects that extended far beyond what anyone could have anticipated. The new training programs for royal protection officers were helping other family members navigate emotional challenges with greater support. The positive media coverage generated by Charlotte's transformed approach to public duties had enhanced public affection for the royal family. Most importantly, a young girl had discovered her own strength and capacity for meaningful service to others. The relationship between James and Princess Charlotte had settled into something that balanced professional responsibility with genuine mutual respect. Charlotte knew that James would always prioritize her safety and well-being, while James understood that his role extended beyond physical protection to include helping her navigate the unique challenges of growing up in the public eye. Their successful partnership had become a model for how royal protection could evolve to meet the complex needs of modern monarchy. Princess Charlotte's 8th birthday celebration included a private party at Kensington Palace where she was surrounded by family, close friends, and a few key staff members who had played important roles in her life. James was honored to be included in this intimate gathering, representing the palace's recognition that his contribution to Charlotte's development went far beyond his official duties. During the celebration, Charlotte made a point of thanking him publicly for helping her learn that being brave meant caring about others even when feeling scared herself. The letters that continued to arrive at Kensington Palace from families whose children had met Princess Charlotte during various engagements testify to the lasting impact of her authentic approach to royal duties. Parents wrote about how their children had been inspired by Charlotte's genuine interest in their lives and her obvious care for their well-being. Teachers reported that students who had met the princess showed increased confidence and kindness in their own interactions with peers, suggesting that Charlotte's example was creating positive ripple effects throughout the community she visited. As James looked toward the future, he felt confident that Princess Charlotte was developing into exactly the kind of royal family member that the British public hoped for, someone who could balance the dignity and responsibility of her position with genuine humanity and compassion for others. The crisis that had brought them together in a moment of mutual vulnerability had ultimately strengthened both of them, creating a foundation for years of successful collaboration in service to the crown and the people they were sworn to protect. The story of a royal guard who chose compassion over protocol when a young princess needed comfort had become legendary within palace circles, representing the kind of human-centered approach to royal service that would define a new generation of monarchy. James Whitfield's willingness to see Princess Charlotte as a child in need of support rather than simply a royal figure to be protected had changed not only her life but also the entire framework for how young members of the royal family would be supported in their public roles for generations to come. The tears that had fallen in a stopped vehicle during a London traffic jam had ultimately watered the seeds of a more compassionate and effective approach to royal duty, proving that sometimes the most important protection officers can provide comes from the heart rather than from training manuals or security protocols.